one of the most important pieces of somebody's life is the coffin.
Yeah.
It's a farewell. It really does mark the end of somebody's life, and the ability to personalise it, I think, is incredibly powerful. They are shocked at how light they are.
Yeah.
They go to pick them up and they nearly knock themselves on the chin because they are incredibly light. So that technology means that we can produce something that is incredibly strong. So we've not had any issues, as I say, it's just this mindset.
So hi Kevin, thanks for coming in today.
Hi John.
So firstly then, LifeArt Coffins, what do you do? What is the product that you provide?
So LifeArt Coffins are a new and innovative technology. We make coffins from a board, which is something similar to between cardboard and timber. It means that we use up to 80% less trees when we manufacture coffins. And the idea is that we want to change the way that coffins are produced in the UK from what is currently manufactured traditionally to this new technology, which we believe is better for families, better environment, and also it offers a lot more affordability options as well for families.
Historically, coffins were solid wood, and the industry itself was based around the making of a coffin. So my granddad, for example, and my dad would make coffins by hand, solid wood, and then things have evolved.
Sure.
And from my understanding, obviously now it's an MDF wood and chipboard, which is used in the majority of coffins in the United Kingdom.
That's correct.
So what actual material do you use?
Yeah, it's interesting you say about chipboard and MDF. I think a lot of families wouldn't realise that that's what the coffins are manufactured from. Equally, the brass effect handles, they wouldn't realise that they're single-use plastic, and also that they're there for more for aesthetic appearance rather than functional. Our coffins are made from a board which is honeycomb board, which means it's super strength, it's very robust. It can carry a weight of over 25 stone, and you can also carry it by the handles, which is really helpful for funeral directors who want to manoeuvre the coffin, but also for families who want to carry the coffin in, because you can carry it at waist height without having to shoulder. So it's a much safer product to handle. Our coffins only weigh around about 11 kilograms, whereas the MDF and chipboard coffins can weigh around 35 kilograms. So very lightweight, but again, incredibly strong.
So it's really interesting actually discussing this topic in general, because when I arrange a funeral, when I come on to the topic of type of coffin of the family, it's always a challenge, and I always find it, I'm always aware how important it is. And I think we have a responsibility now to look at it and look at the materials used.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really important point around that transparency, and clearly the CMA have talked a lot about transparency. I think I know that the ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority, have talked about the transparency on all sorts of advertising connected with the environment, and I'm not sure that the funeral profession is particularly transparent about some of the options for families, as well as what that means in terms of materials. So again, single-use plastics, chipboard and MDF. Chipboard and MDF, if you look at the manufacturer's instructions, they say two things that you shouldn't do with that product. You shouldn't burn it, and you shouldn't bury it, and except in exceptional circumstances, but of course that's what happens to coffins. LifeArt's strategy is very much around producing as I say, an affordable, personalisable coffin that is more beneficial for the environment. We want to make everybody's final footprint really matter. So that final footprint, making that matter for families is important, and being able to understand the options that are available to families, from a traditional solid timber to, if families wish to choose, a chipboard or MDF coffin, or a product similar to LifeArt, whether that's willow, or whether that's a product like ourselves. What we believe is that, given the choice, that's what families would choose. We know that there are customers that we currently supply, when they talk to families about our product and what that offers in terms of environmental options, but also the ability to personalise. Families are very much interested in that, and it's an easier conversation to have with families. I think sometimes that conversation doesn't actually occur, and families are left to choose from a very small range with really not been aware of what that product actually is manufactured from.
And I think this comes down to the actual funeral homes throughout the whole United Kingdom taking more responsibility about providing choice and options. And this again comes down to bereavement and grief. The more options we're able to offer a family, not to bombard them, but give them options for them to choose. Hopefully that will help them with their grief in the future as well.
I think what's important is that funeral directors have conversations with families about their loved one, so they understand what was important to them, what interested they have, so that the funeral director can find solutions to those families' needs. And I think LifeArt can fulfill that opportunity in terms of the personalisation that we can offer. We can print any colour. We have standard collections, and also in the new year people will be able to personalise every single coffin with their own choice. So using a design online facility. So what it means is that families have something that they can that's meaningful to them.
For our family business, we are a traditional company. So my grandfather used to make coffins by hand. But I just think we all have a responsibility to look at what we're doing, and that's the key thing here. The choice is important, but I think historically, the industry can just do things because we've always done them, and that's the same as many industries. So I think it's just really important to keep looking at what we're currently doing to make sure we're trying to protect the future in many ways.
Clearly, I think there's a number of things we can do to lessen the environmental impact from funerals. As with anything with the climate emergency, it's not one solution. This is literally millions of different solutions. Yeah. So I see funeral as part of that solution to reduce the environmental damage that humans are causing, and part of that solution is LifeArt Coffins. Equally, it could be electric vehicles. It can be a number of things, but I think as a profession, I think the funeral industry needs to look at what they can do to make a small difference. I
think again, if the public are seeing that the funeral industry is working so hard to try and help the environment, again, it's down to that personal responsibility, and an industry such as the funeral industry, again, it could be huge. It could be really make a difference at national level, couldn't it?
I think it would. I think a great example is the eradication of plastic carrier bags. So what happened there was that some people stepped forward and started to not offer plastic carrier bags. There was a campaign about eradicating plastic carrier bags. I think Wales were the first one to introduce a levy, then the rest of the UK followed. And there's some impact on people who produce plastic carrier bags and what that means. And I think the same has to be faced into in lots of other industries, and I don't think funeral's any different, in that the industry needs to look at itself, think about what's the right thing to do. And some of these are very, very difficult decisions about how we can make sure that we lessen our environmental impact in the funeral profession. Formaldehyde is one example in terms of leakage into the ground from burials.
Yeah, I just think it'd be great for the industry to lead its own direction. There might be rules put in place for the industry to adhere to, but wouldn't it be great if we could actually lead and the industry to actually guide where we go ourselves rather than be told?
I think that would be a fabulous step forward, and we are talking to more and more funeral directors as part of what we do around their ambitions for lessening the impact from funerals on the climate and the environment. So there's a lot of people like yourself, John, who are starting to think about what that could look like. I think there's with all of these there's momentum that's building. I think there's momentum that's built on the back of people's experience through COVID. And before that, the conversations around climate change. And climate change has gone a little bit off the agenda, understandably, because of the COVID impact. But I'm pretty certain that in years to come, climate change and the climate emergency will be number one in people's minds. This is the biggest threat to the modern world at the moment, is the climate and the impact that's been created by humans and what we're doing to the planet.
Since LifeArt Coffins was established, have you had many problems at all? Have you had issues at venues that you go to, such as crematoriums, for example? Do you have problems with your products?
It's people's mindsets. How do we change people's mindsets to think that we can do funerals different, we can do the coffin differently. We print all of our coffins, they're printed, and we print them to look like wood, so you would be very hard pushed to be able to appreciate the difference of a wooden chipboard coffin with a laminate or a foil finish to one of our coffins. So you can make it look like timber as well if you want. So it's that acceptance, and when people taking the leap, when we start talking to customers and they take our product, and they're from the moment the product arrives, we deliver on trolleys, and it only needs to be a one-person delivery system. It's roll on, roll off. Again, we use small vans, so that's better for the environment. From the moment we deliver the coffins, they realise that it just needs one person to deliver. We don't need several people to move the coffins in and out of the funeral home, and they are shocked at how light they are. They go to pick them up and they nearly knock themselves on the chin because they are incredibly light. So that technology means that we can produce something that is incredibly strong. So we've not had any issues. As I say, it's just this mindset of what's always been done.
I came to your factory around 18 months ago. I was invited down by Simon to see what you were doing, and I was really surprised and quite shocked in how clean and tidy your establishment is.
Yeah, it's everybody that comes to the factory is completely stunned, I guess is a word. It's incredibly different to any other coffin manufacturer in terms of that makes coffins from chipboard and MDF. It's quieter, it's less dusty. This is new technology, and I think it's really important that this new technology is game changing. So our coffins are printed onto board and then formed into a coffin. So it comes in as a raw sheet, and we use print technology. We are more of an information technology business that happens to make coffins. So it's incredibly clean. It is incredibly efficient. So we're able to make all of our coffins to order effectively. Hence, we can personalise, and we can make a coffin in a little over 20 minutes. One of the most important pieces of somebody's life is the coffin. It's a farewell. It really does mark the end of somebody's life, and the ability to personalise it, I think, is incredibly powerful. And we can personalise it with something very simple, whether it's a picture of, say, the grandchildren, or even a handwritten message from the grandchildren that can be put onto the coffin.
So you mentioned as well you're even providing coffins now to artists to do work on.
Yeah, so because people are demanding that personalisation, they don't want what's been the standard fallback position of a brown timber-looking coffin. People want something different to remember the life of the person that they've lost.
I think, again, it comes back to mindset, just breaking down those simple barriers, isn't it, really? It's not much, the switch over isn't that big, it's just that initial.
And I don't think the switch over for funeral directors is a huge leap. I think the very best funeral directors, and there's countless people who do this brilliantly in the funeral profession, will ask the right questions of families, would want to understand about what was important to them, what was important to the person that's sadly passed away, before they then start to offer solutions. And I think this is part of what the role of a funeral director is. And again, that care that the funeral director would give extends beyond the care of deceased and the care of the family to making sure that the product is right as well.
With my tutoring ability, I'm always surprised when the funeral home just give them a choice of a couple of coffins. The first question is that what are your thoughts? asking those open questions can go. You can go so far with that, and you put it over to them. If somebody obviously isn't sure, then that's when we have to step in and do our jobs and give information and guide people, and help them. But it's fascinating really to see the choices now available.
And with a funeral, there's clearly the coffin's an integral part of it, and that ability to personalise is important. But also throughout the whole funeral, there's little things that can be done that means it makes a big difference to families, whether that's from the type of flowers that are purchased, or even pin badges, to some of the memorialisation products, which I think are really important for families. We've had countless people come to the factory, and they are always amazed. Even the ones that have not seen the way that coffins are manufactured, they are absolutely amazed at what we do and how efficient it is.
I certainly was, and it's very interesting to see what you're doing. And from our experience as well, from using some of your coffins now, I think it's a really important discussion to have with families when the environment, especially for ourselves now, the environment is a key point for the family. And again, it comes back to options. I think the funeral directors have a responsibility to provide options to their families they serve. And as you said before as well, with the options, it's not a case of the next week they're comfortable with what happens. In 5-10 years' time, looking back, and they know they could not have done any more for their loved one, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely, John. That's really important, and the family's memory of the funeral is very much centred around the coffin. And the more personalisable that is, the more that families, and this is important to some families, I appreciate not all, but the more environmentally friendly that coffin is important, and that's growing number of families who want an environmental choice. I think in 10 years ago it was a small niche market. I think now it's becoming more expected of families, and I think also families feel aggrieved if they found out afterwards that the coffin they've chosen for their loved one was made from chipboard and had single-use plastic in, because people are very passionate, quite rightly so, about eradicating things like single-use plastic.
And as I said earlier on in the discussion, it's a case of my great-grandfather and granddad making them by hands. It's just slowly evolved, hasn't it, to this point now where we are in this position. And as I say, the coffins that we use at the moment from other providers, from yourselves, we're really pleased with what we have.
Sure.
But again, I think we all have a responsibility just to occasionally stop and reflect on what we're doing, our actions, and to ensure we're protecting the future generations coming through. For
me, it's about informed choices for families to make. I'm very passionate about the role of the funeral arranger and the funeral director to understand the needs of that family, but at the same time to be transparent about those choices. So I think then people can make an informed choice, and not a choice that they go and regret in subsequent years, because that's, for me, would be the last thing I'd want to do for a funeral I'd arrange for a loved one or for another family to experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Caitlin. Thanks for your time today, for coming up to see us. It's been really interesting.
Pleasure.
And quite an eye-opener as well, I think, just to look at from the environmental point of view. And thank you for all the work you're doing behind the scenes as well, to try and raise awareness nationally for the next generation. So thank you.
John, thank you.